Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to break down the biggest stories from the front page of the Seoul Economic Daily, making sense of the complex economic and policy shifts happening right now.
That's right. And today we've got quite a lineup. We're looking at a major shakeup in national R&D policy, a really interesting structural change at Samsung, some key updates on the ROK U.S. nuclear submarine deal, and a big potential IPO in the AI space.
It sounds like a lot, but there's a common thread, isn't there? It feels like we're seeing a fundamental shift in how South Korea approaches risk, whether it's R&D, corporate strategy, security, even the markets.
I think that's a great way to frame it. These aren't isolated stories. They all point towards, well, a move away from that old culture of prioritizing guaranteed success, maybe towards more high-stakes, high-reward thinking.
Exactly. So let's dive into that first piece, the R&D innovation aspect. President Lee made some strong statements at the National Report on Science and Technology Policy in Daejeon. He's clearly linking scientific investment to national prosperity.
Yes, boosting spending is part of it.
Hmm.
But the really startling part isn't just the money, it's the philosophy behind it. The president directly addressed the country's R&D success rate. You know, the fact that it's over 90%.
Which usually sounds good, right? High success means good work.
Well, that's the old thinking. He called that 90% rate, and this is a direct quote, absurd.
Absurd. Wow. Okay, why absurd? That seems counterintuitive.
Because it suggests researchers are playing it too safe. They're only taking on projects they know they can finish successfully. You don't get breakthroughs like, say, a ChatGPT or a revolutionary new medicine by only doing things that are guaranteed to work. A 90% success rate means you're probably not aiming high enough.
So the new policy is about encouraging bigger risks.
Precisely. The key phrase highlighted in the source is giving scientists the freedom and right to fail. It's about encouraging those moonshots.
Okay, I get the logic for innovation. But politically, that's tricky, isn't it? Funding projects that might fail. How does the government justify that potential waste of taxpayer money if something goes wrong? We've seen projects fail before, and the political fallout can be huge.
That is absolutely the core challenge, and it's why this is such a significant policy shift. It's an attempt to make failure, or at least the possibility of failure, an accepted part of the process for achieving major breakthroughs. The message seems to be, aim high. If you fail trying something genuinely difficult, that's okay. We won't penalize you. The calculation now is that the cost of not taking risks, of stagnation, is actually higher in the long run.
And to support this, they're not just changing the mindset, but also investing in talent. What are the specific initiatives there?
Yeah, there's a big focus on human capital. Two main things stand out. First, the plan to select 100 national scientists, starting with 20 next year, creating a sort of top tier for foundational research.
An elite group.
And second, investing in the pipeline. They're setting up new regional AI science schools. Importantly, these schools will have a fast-track connection to the main IST science institutes.
Creating a direct path from specialized high school education right into top-level research environments. That makes sense.
It tackles that talent pipeline issue head-on.
But what about keeping talent? Often researchers get lured away, especially between public institutions and the private sector.
Good point. And that leads to the compensation reforms mentioned. The new policies are actively trying to enable dual employment.
Dual employment, so someone could work at a public research institute and a private company simultaneously.
Exactly, allowing top researchers to draw salaries from both. The idea is if they can earn competitive private sector money while keeping their public research role, maybe through consulting or joint projects, it reduces the brain drain and helps get publicly funded ideas commercialized faster.
Okay, that's quite a change. Now, before we shift gears, President Lee also mentioned communication, and the source specifically brings up that incident at KAIST, the student protest about R&D budget cuts where the student was physically removed. Why reference that now?
Well, it's politically astute, isn't it? By bringing up that very public, very controversial moment, the so-called mouth-blocking incident. The administration is trying to show they've heard the criticism about lack of dialogue. It frames these new policies, more funding, tolerance for failure as a direct response to those concerns. It's an attempt to say, we heard you, the communication wasn't great, here's how we're addressing the substance, turning a PR negative into potentially a positive signal about openness.
Right, acknowledging the past issue to build trust for the new approach. Okay, that makes sense. Let's carry that theme of managing institutional risk over to the corporate world now. Samsung Electronics. A major change there with their central oversight body.
Yes, This is significant corporate news. For the past 8 years, Samsung's group-level coordination has been handled by what was called the Business Support Task Force, or TF, an emergency unit, essentially. The news is that this temporary TF is now dissolved. It's been replaced by a permanent business support office.
Okay, wait. So it goes from task force, which sounds temporary, crisis-driven, to a permanent office. Samsung is apparently denying this is just bringing back the old Future Strategy Office, which got dismantled years ago amid controversy. But isn't a permanent strategic command center basically what that was? Is this just semantics?
That's exactly the question everyone's asking. Samsung has to be very careful with the naming, given the history of the Future Strategy Office. But changing it from a temporary TF to a permanent office, that signals something fundamental. It suggests that top-level, group-wide strategic coordination is now seen as a necessary ongoing function, not just something you activate in a crisis.
So the new normal requires constant strategic oversight, almost like a permanent state of alert.
You could put it that way. And the leadership change supports this view. VP Jung Hyun-ho, who led the TF and navigated Samsung through some tough years, is stepping down voluntarily, it's noted, into an advisory role. President Park Hak-yoo is taking over as the head of the new Business Support Office. It looks like installing new leadership for this new era of permanent strategic management.
And the structure of this new office, it's divided into key teams.
Yes, 3 core teams are mentioned. Strategy, led by Choi Yoon-ho. Management Diagnosis, basically internal audit and performance review, under Jo Chang-hoon. And People HR, led by Moon Hee-dong. Putting these functions under one permanent roof, especially with this leadership transition, strongly suggests to analysts that the upcoming big personnel changes the group-wide executive reshuffles. The inside might be more significant than usual this year. It points towards preparing for structural shifts, not just business as usual.
Interesting. So institutionalizing vigilance. Let's shift again from corporate strategy to national security strategy. Still on the theme of calculated risk, there's an update on the ROK-US agreement about nuclear-powered submarines.
Right, a huge strategic move. The presidential office has provided some specifics on how this will work. It's essentially a split responsibility. South Korea will build the submarine itself, the hull, and crucially, will domestically develop and install the nuclear reactor technology.
Okay, so Korea handles the hardware and the reactor build. Where does the U.S. come in?
The U.S. role is to supply the nuclear fuel for the reactor.
Yeah.
And this is where the details get really sensitive diplomatically. The sources say the fuel enrichment level is still being finalized, but is likely to be kept under 20%.
Under 20% enrichment. Why is that number so important?
That's the internationally recognized threshold. Fuel enriched below 20% is low enriched uranium, LEU. Above 20%, it becomes highly enriched uranium, HEU, which is considered weapons usable material and triggers major concerns under non-proliferation treaties. So by having Korea build the sub and reactor, but the U.S. supply LEU fuel, they seem to be finding a way. Korea gets the strategic advantage of a nuclear sub's endurance, which is what the reports say they want, without crossing that critical HEU line and potentially violating non-proliferation norms regarding fuel production itself. It's a carefully managed technological and diplomatic risk.
A very fine line to walk. And related to these sensitive negotiations, there was news about a document delay.
Correct. The release of a RK-US joint fact sheet, expected to cover both security and trade cooperation, has been pushed back slightly. Importantly, the reason given is not trade disagreements. It's apparently due to needing more time for adjustments in the wording of the security parts. That strongly suggests they're carefully crafting the language around things like this submarine deal, ensuring it aligns perfectly with both countries' policies and international commitments, fine-tuning the sensitive details.
Okay. Let's bring it back home for the final topic, connecting that R&D risk-taking we talked about earlier with the potential financial payoffs. That AI startup, Upstage, they're making moves toward an IPO.
Yes, big news in the tech and finance scene. Upstage, which focuses on generative AI, has officially started the process for an initial public offering. They're aiming to be the first pure-play generative AI company listed on the Korean stock market, targeting a listing sometime next year.
And the market expectations are high.
Extremely high. Just last August, Upstage received a private valuation of around 790 billion Korean won. But the talk now, the market buzz for the IPO, is a potential market capitalization of somewhere between 2 and 3 trillion won. Wow, that's a huge leap in expected value. What's driving that? Is it just the general AI hype or something specific about Upstage?
It's likely a combination. Generative AI is obviously a very hot sector globally right now, high risk,
but potentially enormous reward, fitting our theme perfectly. Investors seem to believe Upstage has the tech and the strategy, particularly in applying AI to enterprise solutions, to really capture a significant share of that market. The willingness to even talk about a $2–3 trillion valuation for a domestic AI firm shows a lot of confidence, maybe fueled partly by that broader national push towards high-tech R&D we discussed. It's the kind of potential commercial success story those policies hope to foster.
And they're moving quickly on the IPO process.
Very quickly, reports say they've already sent out requests for proposals, RFPs, to major investment banks. Korea Investment, NH, Mirae Asset are mentioned. They plan to pick their lead underwriter by the end of this year. So things are definitely in motion for what could be a landmark listing for the Korean tech scene in 2025.
So wrapping it all up today, we've looked at the government embracing the freedom to fail in R&D, Samsung making its strategic oversight permanent, a carefully managed risk in acquiring nuclear submarine capabilities, and the financial market placing huge bets on a domestic AI future. Across the board, it seems the message is that playing it safe isn't the safe bet anymore. Managing and even embracing calculated risk is becoming central.
Yeah, it feels like a recognition that avoiding risk altogether might be the biggest risk of all, the risk of falling behind. Stagnation is the real failure.
We have covered the strategic shifts in R&D policy, Samsung's organizational changes, and developments in high-tech security and AI today. We'll be back soon with more fast analysis of the critical news. Until then, this has been the Deep Dive from the Seoul Economic Daily. Thank you for listening.